So if you're a carpenter, you already know at least 90% of what I'm about to tell you. But if you're not a carpenter and you think you need to buy a square, it might be useful to know which of all the squares that are available might be the one that'll solve your problem. So do me a favor and in the comments let us know if you had to just pick one of these, just one, to do all your jobs, which one would it be? And as we move forward in here, maybe I'll be able to show you a couple of tricks, and in fact one of these, I'll point out, is not even a square at all. So there's a couple of these squares that are fairly recent. I mean, that have not been around since the pyramids, all right? Now that's hyperbole, but for instance, the speed square, the Swanson speed square was invented in 1920 something. So that's been around 100 plus, a century. I have no idea, and neither does ChatGPT, when the squangle was invented, squangle by Mays. Put it in the comments, will you? I'm not going to shut down and look it up. But this, I would guess, started showing up in the 70s, maybe, when framing began to be specialized. We'll talk about that. This, a 48-inch drywall square, did not show up until drywall showed up, which was right around the end of World War II. But these others have been around a good long time. Now let's start with the one I just ended up with. A drywall square, yes, you got to have it for drywall. And every board man, every drywall hanger's got one, and he steps on it and he bends it and he's got to go get another one. It doesn't matter if it's precisely square because the tolerances on drywall are different than the tolerances on lots of other carpentry projects. But man, it's handy to have 16 inches on one side, 6 inches on the other, and to be able to reach clear across a 48-inch sheet, including if you're working at sawhorses, maybe you've got one of these if you're working on roof sheeting, but that probably would slow you down. But there are times and there are places. So if you're thinking about drywall or what you would need this for, one of the things this is specifically adapted for is for cutting along the length rather than just marking. This and a utility knife go together like peas and carrots. So the next one is perhaps what I should have led with, because this is a square. This is a steel square. Carpenter square, framing square. This is a steel square. And there have been a few recent improvements, people who have really drilled down and either improved or taken away some of what is now outdated by construction master calculators and, the Roof Cutter's Bible and, the various rafter books that are on the market. But this thing is first handy for layout. You can slide this along a pair of top plates and mark 2 lines 1.5 inches apart if you want. It's handy in a wood shop. You can square across a whiteboard, you can square across, you can slap this against a piece of plywood, slap your 4-foot level against the blade, you got the blade and the tongue, and get a 4-foot square line. You can put it in a window or a door opening and get a good idea whether or not that opening is square without trying to 3, 4, 5. When if you used a smaller square, you don't really know if over a longer distance it's square. It has tables for brace length, if you're a post and beam guy. It has tables for common rafters and valley and hip rafters and difference in length of jacks on 24 and 16-inch centers. It has more you can lay out a hexagonal cut. You can translate a square into a hexagon. If this thing gets bent so that it is too closed or too open, you can true it up by drawing a line from outside corner to inside corner and then center punching on one side or the other of the center line, the neutral axis of the piece, to open it or close it. You can make a square fence. Steve Ellis turned me on to this. I'm not going to put it all the way on because you're going to get tired of me messing around here, but you can slip a square fence on and make something much better for laying out a set of stairs than a set of stair gauge sets, those little brass buttons. So anything that a carpenter needs to do can be done with this. There are more modern adaptations that will do it faster. There are smaller iterations that are sometimes handier. But for me, if I just had to pick one, it would be this. And this one, by the way, is aluminum. The reason for that is, yes, it does bend easier, But in the sun, on a summer day, you're not going to bend over on a slab and pick up your square and get blisters like could happen, conceivably in Las Vegas with a steel square. The aluminum doesn't give up as much heat into your hand, and so it's friendlier in the summer. Steel square. All right, these guys. This is a combination square, okay, a tri-square. It's called a tri-square because as hard as you try, you're never going to get it square. No, that's not why it's called a tri-square. But that's handy, especially the strong suit on this, and it almost makes it worth carrying in your bags, is what a wonderful gauge it is. You can set this to any length. I mean, within 16ths or 30 seconds, tighten it down, and then use that as a gauge to scribe. You see that? That is so handy. You can get a 45, you can get a 90. You almost always have a little vial in there so you can get level. And as soon as you have level and 90 degrees, you have plumb. And then a newer one, and this one had it before it was lost. It was lost before Ken Jordan gave it to me because I had lost my tri-square. A new one will have a little scribe, a little sharp metal scratch-all slid right in there. So you can pull out a scratch-all for scratching a really nice tight scribe line. Put it back 5 or 6 times, and the first time you fall off a roof, you're going to lose it. But in the meantime, that for a long, long time has been a handy tool. Now this tri-square, combination square, is sort of an all-around, right? Framers, a woodworker can have that in his shop at his bench, but they make them smaller too if you are really just sort of drilling down on woodwork, cabinet work, and you're squaring across stiles and rails and small boards. Well, then this is a little bigger than it needs to be. So there are different sizes, but if you're going to get one, it would have a 12-inch blade. And that, maybe the last thing to mention is sometimes, doggone it, you just need a ruler. Maybe you're doing some drafting, right? You need a nice straight ruler. Be a little careful though, because getting it put back together can be just a little fussy to make contact, tighten it down, and not have it rattle off at the worst moment. So this thing is the only tool that I still own that I bought the first day that I bought tools to go to work for Gary Wagner. This was it. Everything else has long since been lost, or lost and stolen, I can tell you that. It's a squangle by Mays. If I was going to guess, and I will make this up, I would say that this got to the market maybe in the 1970s, when roof cutting began to be a specialization, about the time that Will Holiday was just kicking butt down in California. But what this does, that a tri-square doesn't do, is it gives you the ability to set roof pitches, common pitches and hip and valley pitches also. You got the 2 different sides. It is also, it's a square that'll reach quite a ways and get a pretty good reading. I mean, how far is it across here? That's 8 inches across this. You got an 8 by 12. That's a pretty good square line. It'll hang in your bags like the tri-square will. But if you're not worried about scribing, if you're not worried about, the little niceties that a tri-square brought to the party, this has a vial on an 8-inch torpedo level. There are lots of times and lots of reasons that a squangle is a tool to have. But 2 things. I've got a 16-penny nail cut off and riveted over there because the screw that was in there rattled out. And the wing nut on that's not a 1/4 what is that? That's the next one down. That fell apart early on. And so there's a little maintenance associated with these, but there's a world of things you can do with this that are hard to do with anything that came before the squangle. All right, now before I get to the one that is used the least by a framer, which is a T-bevel square, this is the one that probably is being used the most by framers right now. A speed square, a Swanson speed square. Now there have been other adaptations brought to the market. Martinez makes one. My friend Dan McGee makes a really cool variation on a theme. We did a video on that. You can check that out. Boy, that thing feels good. It's smart. This thing has been a workhorse since 1922 or 25 or something. So it's probably time that it was improved on. But you can buy these for not much money. You can buy them in plastic. You don't feel bad if they get broken or stolen. And there's plenty of things it'll do. You got common rafters, you have degrees, you have hip and valley, you have opportunities to scribe, opportunities for repetitive measurements, 3.5 inches. And anyhow, there's lots of information on a speed square. You can pivot around that for various reasons. And on a set of Occidental bags, it drops right into the slot. Now, having said all that, if you're ready to upgrade, this thing of Mr. McGee's will do all of the above, plus lots more. So don't overlook that, but if you can't afford it, you got to have one of those. Now, this brings me to the last one. And it's the one that I am the least familiar with. And buddy, this is old. Ken Jordan gave me this. This is a Stanley T-bevel square. This is the one that I teased. It's actually not a square at all. There is nothing that you can do with one move to get a square line. Now, with 2 or 3 moves, you can approximate square, throw it up against the work it back from 2 different sides until a pencil line reads the same from both directions, and then it'll be square. But what this is for the odd angles that maybe you've got to bisect an angle. Maybe you're bisecting an angle on something that's roughly hexagonal, or some random angle that has no mathematical value at all that you know of. With this tool, you can get that obscure angle and then get down on the edge of the board and bisect it. You can divide it in half and know what to do with your miter. Now, if those of you who are more schooled in woodwork and old tools than I am know a lot of other applications for a T-bevel square, I and the rest of us are all ears. So bring me up to speed, will you? I'll bet that, I'll bet the Incas had something about like this, because how in the world did they bisect and hew or melt those rocks so that they fit so beautifully? I don't know. But every time I look at 12-sided stone, and then I think of the trouble that I had making dovetail drawers and the things that I enjoyed making for the Ken Jordan bench. And by the way, if you want a set of those plans, you can check out that playlist and get those. But I digress. Squares. The world could never have been built without squares. Buildings can never be added onto or maintained or upgraded without squares. A carpenter is not a carpenter unless he has a few squares and knows how to use them. Thanks for watching Essential Craftsman, and keep up the good work.